Welcome to Ancestor House. Yes, this is Nana Camille Yarbrough, and I am back. You knew that I had to take off a little time for some health reasons, and I'm so happy that I did. On that point for a minute, just before I get into what we're going to talk about today, I think it's very important that I say this to you because I've met many people who didn't do what I did. You know, I see you on the street, I see you in the supermarket. A sister embraced me. I was coming out of Staples the other day on 125th Street, and this woman grabbed me. I didn't know who she was. I said, you know, what? And she said, I look at Ancestor House every week, and I'm so happy you're there. And because of what you do, I'm going to bring some young people into my house, and I'm going to tell them all of the things we hear and see on Ancestor House. And then she said, you were off for a while, and I told her that I had knee replacement surgery. And she was so happy to hear me say that, because many people needed. I see our sisters walking in the street in pain because they don't want to stop and take care of themselves. It's necessary that we stop and take care of ourselves. If we have pain, there's a reason, and we have to, well, you know, you have arrived at Ancestor House, so you're going to hear all of these kinds of things. I am happy to be here again. And today we're going to deal with our story. Why is it important? And why is it important that we choose certain people to tell our story when we are not telling it? Because if you don't tell it, anybody will tell it, and you know they will tell it the way they want to tell it. So here on Ancestor House, we tell the story of the great African people, and we have guests today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to you. She's been here many times before, but we're going to speak with this very, how can you say, a person who has dedicated their lives to telling the story of the great African people and telling it in a way that gives us the kind of respect that we deserve. So I'm going to turn right now to this sister who you've seen before, and I'm welcoming you.
Sister Camille.
Sister, thank you so much for being here. And I'm sitting here. You know how this happens. Sometimes thoughts go right out of your mind. Sister Brenda Green. See, thought when the name went out, but it came back. Thank you so much,
Sister Nana Camille.
Yes,
as I was getting ready to come to the show today, I was thinking about how when I first called upon you, and you have such a legacy. You have always there. If you remember in Yarbrough Books.
Yes.
And in Yarbrough's, the bookstore, which was the oldest independent black bookstore in Brooklyn. And we were trying to save it. We wanted to maintain it.
That's right.
And your books were one of the books we always sold.
Mm-hmm. Cornrows at that time, yes.
Cornrows. And we called you and asked if you would come and help us and give us some words and some poetry and help us. And you said, sure. You came right away. And that's who you are. I mean, you have your own legacy and your own tradition, and we really honor you and respect you and really admire that you've given your life to making sure that our story is told.
As I say, in especially in my book that I'm writing now, I couldn't help myself. That's what I do. That's why I was born, really. And people say, oh, you're being married, whatever. But our story is so important. And I'm particularly focusing on the story of people of African ancestry. And that's why I was drawn to Yarbrough, because you were telling, you had the bookstore with marvelous books in it. And then to find that you are a professor at Medgar Evers College, and you have other titles there too. Tell us more about your work at Medgar Evers.
Yes, so I do have many titles. I'm currently the executive director of the Center for Black Literature, founder of the Center for Black Literature, which was founded in 2003. And one of the major motivations for doing that was to have a place to host the National Black Writers Conference.
Wow,
and I direct the National Black Writers Conference at Medgar Evers College. The center was based on the Gwendolyn Brooks Center at Chicago State, which was founded by Haki Madhubuti. Yes, and I use that as a model because right now there's really no other center that just says Center for Black Literature that focuses on Black literature in this country.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, there
That's
are
extraordinary.
centers, there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
places, African American study programs, the Institute, but a center focused on making sure that the public knows about the work of Black writers and that we celebrate Black writers and we bring them into
Right.
the schools.
Every-
and we
every year they're there.
Yes, we give them awards, we have readings, we have workshops. We're about making sure that people know about the multi-layered work produced by Black writers throughout the African diaspora.
Why is that important? I mean, it's just, some people say you're just storytelling, and it's like if you go to a film and it's there, you're critical of the film, the content, and the images in the film. They say, well, it's just a movie, it's just a film. Why is it important that people get involved in reading?
Well, first of all, it's important that you end up and you have an opportunity to see yourself represented in literature. I think it's a crime that I went through the public school system in New York City, in Queens and Brooklyn, and I didn't read any texts by Black writers until I got to college.
Yes.
And
that's the usual.
Yes, and that should not be. And so if you grow up in an environment and you never see yourself represented in literature, or when you do see yourself, you see stereotypical representations of yourself, it's important that you are in a position, and I see myself in a position to change that. I also chair the English department at Medgar Evers College. And so I was someone who majored in English. I always loved reading and writing. And so part of what I see it as my charge to do is to make sure that we get Black literature in the schools, make sure that it's in our public schools, make sure that we introduce our young people to writers, to Black writers, that they see themselves, they see models of themselves and they can connect and make sure that they're reading stories that represent their experiences, their own experiences. And as you said, when we tell our stories from our own perspective, we're going to give it a different point of view. It's not that other people can't
write
tell.
about us. Yes.
No, exactly.
Yes.
I think about one of I told you we host the National Black Writers Conference, which is hosted every 2 years. We do a major conference every 2 years, and then we do a symposium on a particular writer on alternate years. And we just had our last conference, the 12th National Black Writers Conference was last March.
It's been going for 12 years.
Well, it's been going for 12 conferences. So we don't do it every year. We started in 1986. It's the dream of John Oliver Killens, who was the writer in residence at Medgar Evers College. And we had the first National Black Writers Conference under his direction in 1986. Then Elizabeth Nunez was at the college. She directed the conference, but it was his vision and his insight that we come together, we bring Black writers together, and we talk about the state of Black literature, and we have panels and discussions that look at the issues and the themes that we find in Black literary texts.
I'm going to get down to some crucial things. Today, many of our young people, because of what happened, now I was part of the Black Studies Department at City College, where we had so many of our great leaders, great writers were there. Those who have been involved in our story for a long time and knew the best of us as well as the worst, if you will. Many of the young people who would come there, and we would tell them of our achievements, when our greatness started, how long we've been here, what we've been doing, they would look at the professors and say, you're just saying that. That's not real. That's not true. You've seen this, this what I'm talking about. When do you think, and you said you didn't learn about us, any of our story, reading our literature until you were in college. How do you think, how do I say it? How do we reach these children today who have media, who have instruments that they use? They do text and the language on the computer and on the text is not the language that
Right.
is written usually in our literature. How do we reach them?
I think we have to come up with very creative ways to do this.
Go ahead.
I think that we have to take advantage of the media. We have to take advantage. You might start with performance or poetry, which is what our young people are listening to. That becomes a way in. You know, just like the musician or the actor, the hip hop artist has the opening act. We have to provide some opening acts and as a way to get our students involved. One of the programs that we have at the Center for Black Literature is called Re-envisioning Our Lives Through Literature.
Okay.
And so with that program, we identify teaching artists who are writers, and they go into the classrooms and work with the teachers. And we get funding to buy
Teaching
books.
artist.
Teaching artists. So they are, this year we're going to be working with Mahogany Brown, Mahogany,
I don't know.
I don't remember her last name. We're working with several teaching artists from the Brooklyn Academy of Music. These
You mean
are,
performing artists
some
who
of them are
teach through
performing
their
art,
performance?
teach through their performance or
Okay.
teach through creative writing. So
Okay.
we're zeroing in, we're focusing on using, we're using the book Roll Call, which was a book of an anthology of short stories and poems and essays edited by Tony Medina.
Yes.
And the students will be reading those books. We've bought the books for the students. The teaching artists will go into the classroom and we'll do workshops around creative writing, around poetry, around dramatic writing. They work with the teachers.
What schools? Elementary schools?
We're
or-
working with an elementary school this year, PS3, the Jackie Robinson School. We're working with Medgar Evers Preparatory School, Medgar Evers Preparatory College, and we're working with the Global High School for Citizenship in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn, it's this Brooklyn High School of Music and Theater.
I
So
see.
we're working
I
with
see.
4 high schools.
So you're using theater
We
to get them to literature, to
We're
read.
using theater, we're using performance, we're using creative writing. We're also doing that in the college, because one of the things that we're finding is, I said, you have to have a hook
Yeah.
and you have to have a creative way. So if you give young people opportunities to really tap into what's meaningful for them and to really draw on their imagination and their creativity, then that becomes a way to engage them with literature. And you give them literary texts that are meaningful to them. So we're not having them just read those. They have to read and write in response to it.
Do you bring in examples like Jay-Z? Do you bring in hip-hop text and let them work through that? Or
One of
how do you
one
do it?
of the workshops we do is called Using Lyrics and Letters to Define Ourselves.
Okay,
And that's
you're
focused
on it. Good.
That's focused
good.
on the spoken
Good.
word, where they're studying hip hop as an art form. We have another one using lyrics and letters to define manhood. So we focus
Good. Your
on young
approach.
black male, Latino and
Yeah.
black males
Yeah.
to try and get them to read texts and to develop
Read
texts
Walter
that
Dean Myers
Yes.
wrote many books for black boys,
yes,
growing up. Yeah.
and to really tell their stories, to get them to write letters to their fathers or to the father figures, to their mothers. We have the students produce an anthology at the end of every session. They have to put it in writing. So we want students to get into the habit of writing to real audiences.
Are you find it difficult? Any difficulty there? I was working for Jazzmobile for a while, and I went into elementary schools, and I've had trouble with some students when we were about to read something. They would just start trouble, and I would say, "What is wrong?" I found out they didn't know how to read. So, are you finding that and finding ways to overcome it?
Well, one of the things is it's very important that this is a collaboration with,
Yeah.
with the teacher and the teaching artists and the principals. Before we go into any schools,
Very good.
we have meetings with the principals, because we are trying to get funding and bringing this to you. So this becomes a partnership. We do professional development with the teachers. We talk about teaching strategies.
Very
we
good.
try and match
Excellent.
what
Excellent.
they're doing
Yeah.
with the core standards. But it's really trying to make reading and writing fun and interesting. That's the key. And if students know that they can put on a showcase and perform at the end, if they're going to see their
They're
writing
going to
published,
do that. Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
way of getting
Yes.
them involved and
Yeah.
getting them excited. And then we also try and take them to programs, to cultural
Excellent.
programs, to
Excellent.
theater,
Yeah.
or we bring in artists, teaching artists to do performances. But again, it's recognizing that you can't do it in the same way. If you tell students or young people to just go home and read a book, it's very often
not
they're
gonna
not going to.
happen. Yeah.
So you have to, and you know, it's interesting that I'm talking about the high schools and elementary schools, but we see that in college too. You have to come up with creative ways. They said, well, one of the counselors said to me, well, the students aren't reading the book. I said, well, what can you do to get them to read? You have to come up with a way to make something happen in that classroom that's going to motivate them to read, and you connect them then, and you have them write at that point.
It has to be connected to their lives.
It has to be
something
connected.
that's familiar to them, or a
And-
memory that
right.
they have, and it causes them first to speak about it, to verbalize it, and then to put it on paper.
Right. And you have to use the media too. You
Yeah.
have to use what's in the news. You have to use the music. You have to use the internet. You have to use what they're
Everything that's
using.
available.
You do. You cannot ignore the fact that media plays a major part in their lives.
It's the major.
And you can't get around it.
No.
So you have to
No,
say,
no.
well, how can I use it
Yeah.
and make it work for me?
Yeah.
Because they're receiving so much information.
Much more than we did. I mean,
Yes.
that I did, of
And
course,
me too.
when I was younger. What would you tell parents who are looking at this right now, or grandmothers, a lot of whom had to take up the raising of children because of what crack did to our communities, our families? Grandmothers had to step in and then begin to raise those children the best they could. But today, what would you advise mothers at home who have children who are just beginning to recognize the alphabet and then beginning to read? You mentioned making it theatrical.
I said
in a
making
way.
it theatrical, but you know, I think that this, first of all, make sure that if you can, find some way to become involved in the schools, in your children's schools, in the parent-teachers associations. You have to be involved. If you can be involved, partner with the schools, because our schools need our parents to
And
take
not
a
been
major
going,
role.
yeah.
And I know that there are many children who are almost raising themselves.
Yes.
Okay, so that if you can't do that, you have to figure out a way, find a way to take time with your son or your daughter. Do not expect that they're going to do this on their own.
No, it's too
And
much
I think
other
that's part
too
of the
many other things.
responsibility we have.
Yeah.
You have to make that time. You know, I was, when my children were growing up, their father and I were both working full-time. And my son talks about, even though we were doing that, he talks about remembering on Saturdays, he knew we were going to do something that involved culture or heritage, that he knew that I was going to take the time to do that. Hakeem Ahabudi has a wonderful poem about surrounding your children with art and history and culture. If you want to raise successful young men and women, surround them with art, surround them with music, surround them with books. When you go into a home, you can look and see what is valued. What is valued is going to be in your home and around your wall. When you look at the television, how to get your children to look at it from a critical perspective, not just to take in everything in, but if you're going to look at it, let's critique it.
Yes.
Let's ask questions.
So
Let's have
important.
some dialogue
So important.
around what's happening.
I'm writing right now an autobiographical piece, and I had to look at my life growing up south side of Chicago. Right now, Chicago South Side is like very known internationally as a very violent place. It was when I was growing up, and I had to think, how did I survive? It was the arts. It was going to the library and reading. It was becoming a dancer and becoming disciplined and focused and committed.
Yes.
And all of those things through the arts. So if there's a hook that can be used. Do you remember the first time you read something and got the concept? Oh, it was like a world opening.
A world that was very exciting.
Very exciting. When I began to read in our Catholic school,
I went to
Chicago.
Catholic school too.
Ta-da! Oh Lord, the stories.
I had memorized the stories.
Yes. We were asked to read, and each student had to read two stanzas, like things, and I read it, and I said, wow, I was understanding what the poet meant, and in all kinds of levels. And when it came my turn, I was supposed to read once, and I read, and then I read the next one, and I was on my third one when the teacher said, stop, only one. And so, but it was so exciting, it was a new world opening. And this is what I want to see in our young people.
Yeah.
Know that your world is bigger than the neighborhood you're in or the house you live in. It's the world, and there are many choices and directions you can go in. So that's one reason why I'm so supportive of what you do at Medgar Evers in your community outreach. That's the big thing. Many people are lost, our young children are lost, so it's so important that you reach them.
I know reading is something that I loved. I was one of those children that, had the flashlight
Yes,
in the
night.
bed, since I didn't want to put the book down. I loved reading. But if you mentioned what you did, and I think in speaking to writers and speaking to artists and anyone, people who have become successful, it's because they've had that inner discipline. And books give you a lot of company.
Yes,
I say if you think about at night when it's time to sit down and relax, books can help you to explore the world in so many ways. And
You're never alone.
You're never alone. And I don't think people really can understand the whole value of that. We're getting ready to have a program around celebrating Langston Hughes. Arnold Rampersad just did a major anthology which gives the selected letters of Langston Hughes.
Oh my goodness.
And there's going to be a program sponsored by the Center for Black Literature in collaboration with the Eridac Center on February the 19th, on Wednesday, February the 19th, at the Graduate Center.
I see.
And we're going to be discussing Langston Hughes's work and also have a dramatic reading, dramatic performances of his work and discussing his scholarship. But I'm saying that to say, and think about the life. Langston Hughes did not die a rich man.
No, he
was
didn't.
Committed to writing.
Yes.
He was committed to the writing life. He was committed to telling the story of Black people, and he was committed to celebrating our history and our culture
And who we are. Yeah.
And he did that because of his love. And I think part of how you get people excited about reading and writing is getting them to also know the stories and read the stories of those who have been successful
in it. Even, they might say that Langston wasn't successful because he didn't have a mansion, he didn't have all the, but he was so successful.
Yes.
I mean, what does most writers who are beginning, perhaps not in all cultures, but in African American, Langston Hughes is one of the first they know. And he was so clear and so precise and so loving in his writing. But so I don't know as many writers as I used to know. And I'm not sure of the commitment of today's writers compared to those who in the 30s and 40s when we were really getting into being in literature.
Well, the playing field is much wider and broader. There are more people writing. But if I can, I'd like to just share with the audience.
Please do.
So Langston Hughes, at the Center for Black Literature, in partnership with the Institute for Research on the African Diaspora, and in the Caribbean, it's part of Black History Month, the shortest month, right? On Thursday, February the 7th, the 19th, from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Graduate Center.
Where's that?
365 Fifth Avenue. It's Fifth Avenue and 34th Street, and it's free and open to the public. The program's going to present an evening of Langston Hughes and the impact of his work on writers and literature and other writers. And it's going to be moderated by Robert Reed Farr, who's Distinguished Professor of English and American Studies at the Institute for Research on the African Diaspora. And also Gordon Thompson, Dr. Gordon Thompson, who's a professor of English at City College.
That's right.
And he's also director of the Langston Hughes Festival. And David Mills, he's an actor and writer and poet, and he's going to do a dramatic reading. So it should be a really interesting evening, and I encourage people to really come out.
And when are you giving your particular?
We take a break.
When are you giving your yearly presentation?
Okay.
At the place?
Oh, she said.
No, keep
Go ahead.
Oh, keep going. Yeah, we have the one-day symposium. Is going to be on March 28th, Saturday, March 28th, the National Black Writers Conference Symposium, and we're Voices of Liberation and Resistance, and a tribute to Danny Glover.
Danny Glover?
Yes.
The movie star?
Yes.
Are you kidding?
Yes.
He's going to be there?
He's going to be
You see
there.
how foolish I am.
He's going to be there.
Great.
We were motivated to do that because at our last conference we did a panel looking at the Black arts movement and the Umbra movement, and we realized
what do you mean,
that
the Umbra movement?
The Umbra movement was a group of artists from the Lower East Side, Black artists from the Lower East Side. In the 60s, they included Ishmael Reed, Steve Cannon.
Yes.
Do you know? And they came together. They were one of the earlier movements before the Black arts movement.
Yeah.
Right. And so we had poets. We had David, Steve Cannon was there, and as I said, Ishmael Reed, and David. I'm lost his name. But anyway, the conversation came out about the need for younger people to know about the tradition of activism in terms of the arts. And so we said we wanted to have an intergenerational conversation. So we're beginning by having Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates, you remember Paul Coates, the son of Paul Coates?
Yes.
He writes for the Atlantic. He writes for the Atlantic, I believe. But he's a journalist. He did a book, his memoir called The Beautiful Struggle, which tells the story of growing up in the home of his father, who was a former Black Panther, Paul Coates. But he's one of our speakers. We're going to have a viewing of the film, The Black Power Mixtapes, which features Danny Glover, but also features some of the younger artists like Talib.
That's right.
And
Talib Kweli, is that what you said?
Kweli.
Your son, right?
Yes, Talib Kweli, and we have Sonia Sanchez in the poems. We have Jamal Joseph. So we have an intergenerational
and
group.
Panthers, or former Black Panthers.
And so there's going to be the showing of the film, and we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to have readings by people. Askia Touré will be there. Oh yes, Askia Touré, Jacqueline Woodson, who just won the National Book Award, Sapphire. So it's going to be an interesting evening. It's all day.
Yes.
Bridget Davis, she just did a new book. So we want to have intergenerational. And we think it's really important.
And you have the students from the college who are involved in it because, for grades and everything else.
Right.
That's always good.
And Danny Glover Danny Glover has really been not only an actor, but really a strong voice in terms of activism.
Activist.
He's really, truly an activist, and we want to pay tribute to him.
It's
and
very
so,
important. So important.
He's going to give our closing keynote speech, and so that'll be all day Saturday.
And when is that?
That's Saturday, March the 28th. And if you go to the website for the Center for Black Literature, www.centerforblackLiterature.org, or you Google Center for Black Literature, the whole program is there. But there's another program.
And do you have an email? Go ahead. Do that, then we'll get to the email.
the program on February the 26th, we're doing another program at Medgar Evers College, Reflections on Malcolm X. And this program is in celebration of the publication of the Diary of Malcolm X, which was edited by Herb Boyd and Alicia Al-Shabazz.
That's the daughter.
The daughter. And it's really focused on his impressions and his personal observations during his travels to Africa and his pilgrimage to the Mecca. So Herb Boyd is going to be in conversation with, I'm sure you know, Professor Gloria Brown Marshall.
Yes.
Yes. So they will be in conversation and talking about the book. That's open and free to the public, and that'll be at Medgar Evers College on Thursday evening, February the 26th.
This month. Black History
Black
Month.
History Month. And I was really pleased and honored to be at a program that the Newark Public Library is doing. I have never, their Black History Month, have you seen their exhibit?
What I have the flyer. I have the email of it, and you're part of that program.
I was part of the opening program, which was on February the 5th.
Right.
February the 5th. But on Saturday, February the 14th, they're doing a program called Black on Paper at 2 o'clock. They're going to discuss, you have the poet Anasa Mayat and Chisa Hutchison. They're going to discuss the process of getting works published. Then on Thursday, the same day, at our program, there's going to be a panel discussion, Uncommon Genres in Black Literature.
What does that mean, uncommon genres in Black literature?
Well,
Can't we write about all kinds of things?
Yes,
Haven't we done that already?
They're talking about
What
the
is this?
paranormal.
They're talking about zombies and,
the novel.
and all of those things.
But you know, I always think about what, Amiri Baraka and Walter Mosley and there's so many people who've been writing of what we call uncommon genres. They call it speculative fiction.
That's right.
Remember
Speculative
Cherie Renee Thomas did the book on the fiction produced by Black writers. And I remember what Walter Mosley
What's it called,
said.
Butler?
Octavia Butler, right.
Yeah. But hers always had a racial kind of a thing to it, too.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that many, the literature that Black writers produce, Walter Mosley said the most natural form is to do speculative fiction because then you can really think outside of the box. And what is...
But go ahead.
We're saying you can think outside of the box. So when we say paranormal or speculative fiction or uncommon genres, it's really what we're writing. It's the range. It represents the range of genres that we write in.
You're talking about scandal. That's what you're talking about.
But the point is, we're writing in many ways. We're writing in many. We're writing
and taking it beyond.
And we cannot think about the writing we produce in one way, because there are too many people who still think, oh, let me go Black History Month. Let me go find
something black.
Yeah, something black. And our writing is so complex. And it's written.
The thing is,
so
we
many
are
ways.
universal. As I had thought about before, but then when I was doing To Be Young, Gifted, and Black and read Lorraine Hansberry's work, and she was talking about if you're specific, you are universal, and that's true. So if we are really telling the story about ourselves in all of our complexities, anybody can identify with that.
Right.
And when I say complexities, we mean, I was looking at television today and speaking with a brother, and people were telling horror stories about their lives. And I said to him, there was a time when we would say, we don't do that. Black people don't do that. But black people do. We do all kinds of things. And I do think we need to write about it and tell about it and share about it, because that's part of our healing, to expose, to realize that we are this thing called human. And we can come from many areas. But I do have a problem with the zombies and all of, because our children are looking at that as if,
but they're reading that. When we were talking earlier about how do you connect, they're reading that. When we did the program with Octavia Butler,
yes,
we had so many people, and it crosses race, it goes across race and ethnicity. Everyone's reading it. people are fascinated with the paranormal, and I think it speaks to
Okay,
the
paranormal
absence-
what? What do you mean?
The paranormal.
Break that down. Break it down.
People are fascinated with what is unknown. People are fascinated with not with mysticism, with not being able to explain or wanting to find out more about the origins of life, about their history. I think there's a gap. There's a gap in terms of that spiritual need that all of us have as human beings.
See,
in
you
our
said
lives.
the word, the spiritual need. There's
Yes.
something that
So-
is spiritual, and then we're taking
So
off
when-
into these monster things. That's not
Because when you
necessarily
have
spiritual.
that void, what
Yeah.
do? You look for other things, and that's why it's happening. So if you can use
We have to fill that void with our story, which is
That's
why
right.
you're here.
That's right.
That's why
Yes.
we are here, and why what's happening at Medgar Evers is happening at Medgar Evers. And the school, largely, I mean, the name of this African-American hero, and then the young people who go there and work, hopefully, in as difficult as it is today, to focus, that they would focus on themselves being in that great African family, African-American family. And so you're being there and you're keeping the focus on our story, our history. And I know there have been all kinds of activities to take it away, to lessen it, I believe, just as so-called gentrification is taking place in the communities. It is also happening in our schools, where our story is being diminished and wiped out. What was this story about the professor from Howard University? She was in Atlanta, and she opened a school there, and some teachers were teaching black studies, and she fired them. So
Well-
this is something that we have to fight, and we're talking about speculative writing. I'm saying we have such a history. There's so much there to tell, rather than going off into
Well,
to
I
the
think
monsters.
I think you have to realize again when you're. I think it's really important that we tell our story, and it's really
Absolutely.
important that institutions such as Medgar Evers College, which was founded on the principles of the historically black colleges, of educating black young people and youth, and also providing them with an education that was not only about academics, but that also celebrated their history and culture and knowledge of self. And that celebrated their history and culture and knowledge of self, and that also emphasized the importance of connecting to your community and the importance of service and giving back.
Yes.
And also, the historically black colleges had that spiritual dimension that you
Yes,
were
they
talking
did.
about.
Yes, they did.
That part of what we're doing is taking care of each other and healing each other.
Yeah.
And I think about what Marion Wright Edelman and also Shirley Chisholm says that service is so important. And I think that we really have to stress that in our schools and with our young people. And we're in the process of trying to make sure that happens at colleges like Medgar Evers
Yes.
College.
Yes.
Shirley Chisholm said, and service is the rent we pay to live on life,
Yeah.
live this life on
Yes.
earth. And so service is really important. But I do want to go back to the idea we have to give people their history. We have to show positive role models. And we have to start where they are. We have to start
Yes.
where they are.
Yes.
So if they're reading only urban fiction, that's a start. You start there, and
Urban fiction, explain that. You're not
you
going to get
know
away
that
with
fiction you see.
What-
Yeah, you know that
what do you
fiction.
mean? You mean strip lit? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I
talking
know,
about?
and I would
Straight
know.
lit?
I'm not an advocate of it, but if they're reading that, I'm gonna say, okay, let me show you what else you can read, or let's deconstruct that.
If you can
what
get
are the
to
images?
them, if you can get to them, yeah.
But my whole thing is-
I started reading funny books. You know,
The
when you were a
comic
kid,
books,
yes,
right.
when I was, and that was good reading. And then I went on to something else, but it wasn't. It's not straight lit.
You don't
It's
stop-
street lit.
street
It
lit,
is not
yeah.
that. That I've heard you. I went to one of your conferences in where was it, in Brooklyn, where you had some writers assembled, and there's one man who was writing that was his focus. And when he said, well, they'll start here and then they'll graduate to another level of writing, I didn't agree with him, but I didn't say anything. But how do we really reach the majority of people who go down the street and see all of these books which have to do with this, excuse me, this hoe and this B word and this one, and they stay there because they think that is what, then they go on television and that those
It's
images
reinforced.
and those stories are reinforced, and they think this is the way life is. I went to Chicago recently for a family a reunion, and one of my nieces has grown sons. They're all in college, but they know nothing about what we're experiencing, nothing about what's happening in the world. They don't care. It's like I'm in college, I've got my job, and so they are not going to be the generation who sat at Woolworths and made a difference.
But
That-
you know,
what I'm
even
saying?
though, and I hear what you're saying, there are a lot of young people like that, but there are also a lot who are very active. One of the things we had when classes first started in the fall was a National Poetic Day of Action. And we had a number of youth come together and participate in a program that was national, was around the forced imprisonment, and I'm not remembering the writer, but it was to talk about the need to have poetry that speaks against injustice. The whole Ferguson
Yes.
incident has
Yes.
really stirred a lot of people.
That's right.
I mean, my grandson participated in the march. I mean, people are becoming more aware. So there is a group. There are some who are not listening, but there's another group. I like to think
If you
about
bring them
the
together,
children of
yes.
the children of the Black arts movement. People like Ross Baraka,
Yes.
April
Absolutely.
Silver, Kevin Powell. I mean, they are the new activists, and I see hope when I look at them because they have a level of consciousness, and we are the ones we've been waiting for, and we're not going to. I mean, he says that. I mean, Alice Walker's book.
Yes.
We're not going to get everyone, but we take a little at a time.
No,
right?
but you were talking about techniques of how to reach out to them, and because the opposition is strong and
That's
it's
right.
powerful and it's visual, and so to get them to stop texting so much and read is a part of the struggle that you have. But
That's right.
you're winning the struggle because you're bringing so many people to the front line, and when they, as you said, take them out to see things, experience things, take them to theater. Wow, that's an exciting thing.
We're bringing some of the students at Mega to the Lanston Hughes program. I
Excellent.
talked to the I said
Excellent.
identify. We have that responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
And the programs like you're doing here at Ancestor House is a way of helping to continue that tradition and help people to realize that they have that responsibility.
Our story is so exciting, man. I mean, even the writers, the performers. Look at the literature, the lyrics of Stevie Wonder. That's just one, but it goes on, and that has been the soundtrack of many of our lives, and so that's the poetic, the lyricist, the musical stuff. But the writers have been there also, and we need to highlight them just as we highlight the music. And so that's why I have this Ancestor House. It's a small show, but it has a very loyal audience. I have to say, people just talk to me about it.
Right. I also think we have to remember there are a lot of writers who are self-published.
Yes.
Becoming self-published becomes a way to get in, and I encourage people, if you're really in love with writing, you're not going to make money writing, but if you're passionate about writing and you study the craft and you publish your book, and that becomes a start, a way in, and you have to be very creative. The writer and the artist right now has to be very creative because we don't have bookstores anymore.
That's right.
We don't have the Black bookstores. Even the large mega stores are folding.
Listen, I used to go to Barnes & Noble's on 82nd Street and Broadway, and they had a whole section for Black literature, Black writers. Now it's about this big and about 5 shelves.
Do you know what they've done? They've taken all of the fiction out. It's all under African American studies.
But it's not really there.
I know. I'm saying they've
Yeah.
taken. And if you don't know who the writer is, you
can't.
won't know.
That's right.
And so how do people get to know about who the writer is, who's writing?
It is awful. It is shameful.
Yes, it is. And that's why you need the National Black Writers Conference.
That's right. That's why you're there.
That's right. That's right.
At Medgar Evers College in the country of Brooklyn. Of Brooklyn. Listen, it's been an honor always to talk with you and have you on the show because you have so much information and enthusiasm and involvement and outreach. Doctor, I'm sitting here happy that I've been here this long and that I've been able to experience so much. But there are certain things that do happen. Right now, Dr. Brenda Green, I said all that to get to your name because your name went out of my brain. But it just came back and that shows it's not Alzheimer's. It's just time. But thank you for doing what you're doing there. I've witnessed many and been a part of some of the events there. And I see the spirit that keeps it going. And the story is so important. Our stories are endless and so intriguing. I mean, as I told you earlier that I'm writing now, and I get so involved in my own story. It's very exciting. But historically and relationships and talking about where were you born? You were in New York?
I was born actually in New Jersey. My father's from St. Croix, and my mother's from South Carolina.
Oh, nice
and
mixture
so my father was actually in the Army when I was born in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, on the Army base.
On an Army base.
On an Army base.
Okay.
Yes, but I grew up in Brooklyn and Queens.
In Queens.
Yes.
And, so there, I was working again for another little organization with something I've forgotten the name of, but they sent you into hospitals, writers into hospitals, poets, and there is a place on the 100 State Office Building in Harlem, one of the floors where I went, and these people had emotional, mental challenges, and I sat there, and they just about 8 of them just looked at me and. I said, how am I going to reach them? I read something and they just looked at me. I began to ask them, where are you from? When they began to tell their story, the light came on.
Yes.
The light came on. And it was fascinating to see this happen in the room. And then they began to want to speak one over the other. And so that telling of your own personal story is something that's so powerful. And as a performing artist, as an actress, I know that when you sit in a theater and it darkens, which means it isolates you into your own little space, and then you see those lights and those people come and they speak things that maybe you wanted to say but you couldn't say them, but someone else is speaking those words. The same things happen when you're reading a book and somebody's saying something that is really your life. It brings life into you. So
and sometimes it can even bring tears.
Oh, absolutely. But it can change you.
Yes,
it can heal you. So reading, some students have told me that they've carried, and mothers have told me that the Shimmer Shine Queens, and her daughter takes it to bed. She keeps that book by her bed, and she reads it over and over again. That's what is important to me, that it does catch the imagination and the spirit of it. These are children's books, and it makes a difference in their lives. So I'm very honored to have written just 4 books for children, because there's feedback and there's power in that. And so that's one reason why I was attracted when you said Incura Books store needs some help. Come, and I hadn't heard of it before, so it was good to be there. There's a bookstore in Harlem, Sisters Uptown Bookstore. I'm glad they're there. They're the only one in the neighborhood. Yeah,
probably the only ones left in New York City, right?
In terms of black
bookstores.
And it's a beautiful place also. So I would advise you, if you're in Harlem, even if you're in Brooklyn, come on to Harlem and go to the Sisters Uptown Bookstore. I think it's on 150 52nd or 53rd in Amsterdam, but you can find it.
So wherever we can support,
Yeah.
wherever we
Support
can,
them.
and I always think about what Sonia Sanchez says, it's wherever you can buy
Yes,
the books.
yes.
Buy the books. Even if you're not going to read them, you can buy them and give them away.
Somebody
You
said
give it.
to my was in my apartment. They said, "Why do you have all these books?" Because they're in your heart.
That's
you know,
right.
you've read them. They've given you something. You don't just throw them away. You keep them and you refer to them. You're walking. I'm walking down the hall and I'm seeing books, thoughts coming back. You're never alone. It's
Never.
like Ancestors. That's why Ancestor
That's
House,
right.
right?
I remember my sisters teased me when growing up, and I said I wanted to, at one point, wanted to run away from home. But the only thing I packed were my books.
Books.
A suitcase full of books.
You were not going to be by yourself.
No, I wasn't going to
No.
be by myself. And I
No.
think one of the most revealing, I had an opportunity actually here in Harlem to run a Right to Read program. I ran it for a year, and just it was for adults who didn't know how to read. The adults in that program were reading at like maybe the second or third grade level.
Yes.
And they had never learned how to read. And that
Yes.
was just such a very
Poignant,
poignant
yes.
experience. It was powerful to get people in and to see them begin to read. For whatever reason, it might have been physical, you know, it might have been health reasons
Yes.
or economic, but they were finally learning how to read. And so reading is something that I've always been passionate about. When I started teaching, when I saw young people were having trouble reading, I did my master's degree in the teaching of reading. Because,
Oh.
yes, that was my master. I wanted to look and see what I could do to get
right,
people more
right.
engaged in reading. And I would say for young people, my son, I thought because I was an educator that he should be reading when he was 3 years old, but he was writing before he was reading. And I talk
Stop.
about writing your way into reading. If they're not reading, give them something to write. He started writing, and then he began to create stories. So there are different ways you can get people involved with reading.
And then he became
A-
Talib.
Talib Kweli, but both of my sons are writers.
Oh, really?
Yes, but the other
I
one
didn't
is a
know that.
professor of constitutional law
Oh, my goodness.
at Columbia.
All right,
So
all
he
right.
writes academic, constitutional. He
Law.
writes academic,
Extraordinary.
and Talib does the lyrics.
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
they're
he
both
does.
writing.
Yeah.
They both are passionate, and that's the other thing. You are passionate. I mean, that's what gets people started, to be passionate about whatever you want to do. Not just to be a teacher, my cousin said, but to be an educator. Not to be a dancer, be the best that you can be.
That's right.
The artist. Just put everything that you want into what you love.
It
Find
makes,
your
it makes
passion.
it different. Yeah, it's you have to be passionate about it. You can't be just you know. I can buy a house. I can make a living. I can get paid well, but there's something missing. I talked to somebody today who just mentioned someone who goes into the houses of rich people to deliver services. And he said there's something missing in so many of the houses. They have money, they have huge mansions, but that
Spirit and
the
the
spirit
passion.
is not there because they wanted money. And everybody needs finances. But if you don't have that, or if you have it and don't have that heart thing, don't have your spirit satisfaction, then your life is really empty. I want to thank you, Dr. Brenda Green, who is head of
The Center for Black Literature and the English Department at
Right.
Medgar Evers College.
That's right.
And director of the National Black Writers
Go
Conference.
ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
And you have events coming up this month.
We have
and
events this month. Go to our website, www.centerforblackLiterature.org, or you can call 718-808-04-8882. 718-804-8882 for more information.
Sure.
And I want to thank you, Nana Camille Yarbrough, for having me on Ancestor House and having this beautiful spiritual place.
Isn't it? Isn't it something? Yes.
To really
yeah.
host the show.
This is Tamari Temple here. It's the poet, the writer, George Edward
The
Tate.
Griot of
the
Harlem.
Griot of Harlem,
Yes.
yes, and his wife Akosawa have organized, put this place together. thought it out and brought all of the beautiful energy signs here. And I want to thank them for allowing and inviting and having Ancestor House tell our story here, bring our heart and our ancestors here. We have worked together. This is a new place. We are working with a new team, and it's a good feeling. I hope that we can do the best that we can do for you here at Ancestor House. And we'll see you next week with other spirit people telling the story of Africans in diaspora. Wherever you are, this is your story. But thank you so much for joining us today. And my sister Brenda Green, see, I remembered your name right off that time.
Thank you.
Dr. Professor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay, it's my privilege.
We'll see you next week here on Ancestor House, telling the story of the great African people.